The rain had been falling over Chicago since dawn, transforming the city streets into mirrors that reflected the amber glow of streetlights. By evening, the downpour had softened into a persistent drizzle that clung to everything: windows, awnings, the shoulders of pedestrians hurrying home. It was the kind of November night that made people seek warmth wherever they could find it. Vivienne Drake sat in the back of her black Mercedes, watching the city slide past her tinted window. At 34, she had learned to appreciate these rare moments of stillness. The leather seat beneath her was heated, a small luxury that contrasted sharply with the cold calculations that typically occupied her mind. Tonight, however, she had promised herself something different: a quiet dinner, alone, away from the constant demands of her position. "We're here, Ms. Drake," her driver announced, pulling up to a curb on a side street in Little Italy. Vivienne studied the restaurant through the rain-streaked window. Bella Notte was exactly the kind of place she needed tonight: small, unassuming, tucked between a laundromat and a vintage bookstore. Its faded green awning and warm yellow light spilling onto the wet sidewalk suggested comfort rather than pretension. She had discovered it months ago during a rare afternoon walk, drawn by the genuine aroma of garlic and basil that seemed to emanate from its very walls. "I won't need you for the rest of the evening, Thomas," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become second nature. "Go home to your family." "Are you certain, Ms. Drake? The weather—" "I'll take a cab." She softened her tone slightly. "Your daughter has a recital tonight, doesn't she?" Thomas's expression shifted to surprise, then gratitude. "Yes, ma'am. Piano, 7:30. Then you should be there." Vivienne stepped out of the car before he could open her door, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. She wore a charcoal cashmere coat over a simple black dress. Elegant, but understated, the kind of outfit that helped her blend in rather than stand out. The Mercedes pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. Vivienne stood for a moment, letting the cool mist settle on her face. In her world, showing weakness was dangerous. Showing kindness could be interpreted as weakness. But Thomas had driven for her father before her, and his loyalty had been proven countless times. Small gestures like remembering his daughter's recital cost her nothing and bought something more valuable than fear: genuine dedication. She pushed open the door to Bella Notte, and a small bell chimed above her head. The interior was exactly as she remembered: intimate and worn in the way that spoke of decades of service rather than neglect. Checkered tablecloths covered perhaps 15 tables, most of them empty on this rainy Sunday evening. The walls were decorated with faded photographs of Italian coastlines and what appeared to be the owner's family history. A vintage espresso machine gleamed behind a small bar, and the kitchen beyond emanated warmth and the rich scent of slow-cooked tomato sauce. An elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her face creased into a genuine smile. "Welcome, welcome. Come in from the rain, dear." "Good evening, Mrs. Rosselli," Vivienne said, allowing herself a small smile. She had made it a point to learn the owner's name during her first visit. "Ah, you remember me," the old woman's eyes sparkled. "And on such a terrible night you come to us. Come, sit wherever you like. We are quiet tonight, but the osso buco, it is perfection." Vivienne chose a corner table near the window, where she could sit with her back to the wall and watch both the entrance and the street beyond. Some habits were too deeply ingrained to break, even during a peaceful dinner. She removed her coat, draping it over the chair beside her, and settled in with the ease of someone comfortable in solitude. A waiter approached with menus and water. Vivienne glanced up and recognized him from her previous visits. A man perhaps in his late 30s, tall and lean with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen more of life than his current occupation might indicate. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes, a deep brown, held an observant quality that Vivienne found unusual in service workers. Most people in his position learned to see without really looking, to serve without making genuine contact. This man was different. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and measured. "It's nice to see you again." Vivienne's eyebrow raised slightly. She hadn't expected him to remember her. "Good evening. You have an excellent memory." Occupational hazard. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You ordered the aglio e olio last time, extra red pepper flakes, and you sat at the same table." Observant. "I prefer to think of it as attentive." He set down the water glass with practiced precision. "Though I should confess, you're one of the few customers who actually looks at the photographs on the walls. Most people don't notice them." It was true. During her last visit, Vivienne had studied the old family photos, partly out of genuine interest and partly out of habit, noting exits, observing patterns, always gathering information. The waiter had noticed her noticing. "They tell a story," Vivienne said simply. "That they do." He opened his notepad. "Can I start you with something to drink? We have an excellent Chianti that just came in." Vivienne considered. She rarely drank alcohol during business dinners. Clarity was essential when navigating the complex negotiations that dominated her professional life. But tonight was meant to be different. A brief respite from the constant vigilance. "The Chianti sounds perfect," she said. "And I'll start with the caprese salad, then the osso buco Mrs. Rosselli recommended. An excellent choice. The osso buco has been simmering since this morning." He paused, then added, "Mrs. Rosselli is my aunt. She'll be pleased you took her suggestion. I wasn't aware this was a family establishment. Fourth generation. My grandfather opened Bella Notte in 1952, fresh off the boat from Naples." His expression held genuine pride. "I'm Marcus Hayes. The family name got Americanized somewhere along the way, but the recipes stayed Italian." There was something refreshing about his straightforward manner. In Vivienne's world, every conversation was layered with subtext, every word potentially concealing a threat or an opportunity. Marcus Hayes spoke like someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to gain from pretense. "It shows in the food," Vivienne said. "Tell your aunt I said so." "I will. She'll probably insist on sending out extra bread." Marcus smiled, then headed toward the bar to place her drink order. Vivienne watched him go, her analytical mind cataloging details despite herself. The way he moved suggested physical awareness beyond typical restaurant work, balanced, economical, the gait of someone who'd had training. His hands, she'd noticed, bore small scars on the knuckles, the kind that came from impact rather than kitchen accidents, and his eyes held that watchfulness, that perpetual assessment of his surroundings. Former military, perhaps, or law enforcement. Men who'd lived through intensity often sought simplicity afterward, trading adrenaline for routine, chaos for the predictable rhythm of civilian life. She'd seen it before. Vivienne pulled out her phone, intending to check messages, but stopped herself. Not tonight. Tonight was about stepping away from the endless stream of decisions and demands. She set the phone face down on the table and turned her attention to the street beyond the window. The rain had picked up again, and pedestrians hurried past with umbrellas bent against the wind. A taxi splashed through a puddle. A couple ran laughing toward the bookstore next door. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, blissfully unaware of the hidden machinery that kept their city running. The negotiations, the territorial arrangements, the careful balance of power that men and women like Vivienne maintained from the shadows. She had inherited her position at 26, when her father's heart attack left a sudden vacancy at the top of an organization that had been in their family for 3 generations. The old men who had served under her father had expected her to be a figurehead, a placeholder until they could consolidate power among themselves. They had underestimated her intelligence, her strategic mind, and most critically, her absolute unwillingness to be controlled. 8 years later, she had not only solidified her position, but expanded operations into territories her father had never imagined. She'd done it through careful planning, strategic alliances, and an ability to see 3 moves ahead of everyone else. The men who had doubted her were either working for her now, or had learned to respect her from a distance. But success at this level came with isolation. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not completely. Even her closest advisors remained at arm's length, separated by the invisible wall of her position. She had lovers occasionally, but they were always kept separate from her professional life, brief interludes that ended before emotional attachment could complicate matters. It was, she acknowledged in rare moments of honest self-reflection, a lonely way to live. Marcus returned with her wine, setting it down with a gentle precision that suggested respect for the ritual. The 2019 Chianti. One of my personal favorites. Vivienne lifted the glass, noting the deep ruby color, the subtle legs that indicated quality. She inhaled. Notes of cherry, leather, a hint of tobacco. "You have good taste. I've had time to develop it." Something flickered in his expression, there and gone before she could analyze it. "Your salad will be out shortly. Can I get you anything else?" "This is perfect. Thank you, Marcus." He nodded and moved to check on the restaurant's other patrons. An elderly couple near the front, 2 women engaged in animated conversation at a center table, a businessman absorbed in his laptop in the opposite corner. The Sunday evening crowd was sparse, exactly what Vivienne had hoped for. She sipped her wine slowly, savoring the complexity. It was excellent, and she made a mental note to remember the vintage. Simple pleasures like this had become rare in her life, moments where she could focus on taste and texture rather than strategy and survival. The capris arrived, thick slices of buffalo mozzarella alternating with heirloom tomatoes, fresh basil glistening with olive oil, a drizzle of aged balsamic creating dark rivulets across the plate. Vivienne took her time with it, appreciating each bite. Mrs. Rosselli clearly sourced her ingredients with care. As she ate, Vivienne found her gaze drifting back to Marcus. He moved through the restaurant with quiet efficiency, attending to customers with genuine attentiveness but never hovering. When he spoke with the elderly couple, she noticed him lean in slightly to hear the old man's soft voice, his patience evident. With the two women, he offered recommendations with enthusiasm, his smile reaching his eyes. Even the businessman, clearly preoccupied, received polite service without unnecessary interruption. It was the mark of someone who genuinely cared about doing his work well, not for recognition or advancement, but for its own sake. Vivienne found it refreshing. In her experience, everyone wanted something. Everyone was angling for position, for favor, for advantage. Marcus Hayes seemed content to simply be good at what he did. Her phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at the screen, a text from Vincent Romano, her second-in-command. Nothing urgent, just a status update on a shipment arriving Tuesday. She replied briefly, then set the phone aside again. Vincent was capable. He didn't need her micromanaging every detail. That was the point of building a solid organizational structure. She shouldn't have to be involved in every decision. Marcus cleared her salad plate and refilled her water glass. The osso buco will be another few minutes. Aunt Maria insists on perfect timing. I'm in no hurry, Vivienne said truthfully. Good. Food this good deserves patience. He glanced toward the window. The rain's getting worse. You'll want to call a cab before the evening rush hits. I will. Thank you. He moved away again, and Vivienne returned to her wine and her thoughts. The restaurant had filled slightly. A family with 2 young children took a large table near the kitchen, their energy bringing new life to the quiet space. She watched the parents navigate the chaos of keeping 2 kids entertained while waiting for food, their practiced teamwork evident in small gestures and exchanged glances. Another life she would never have. Children required stability, presence, safety, all things incompatible with her world. She'd made her peace with that years ago, or so she told herself. Seeing happy families occasionally triggered a small ache she refused to examine too closely. The osso buco arrived, and Vivienne's attention shifted entirely to the plate before her. The veal shank had been braised to fall off the bone tenderness, nestled in a rich sauce of wine, tomatoes, and aromatic vegetables. The gremolata, lemon zest, garlic, and parsley added bright contrast. Alongside it, saffron risotto gleamed golden and creamy. It was, without exaggeration, one of the finest things she'd tasted in months. Vivienne ate slowly, methodically, giving each bite her full attention. This was why she'd come to Bella Notte, not just for privacy, but for this. Authenticity, quality without pretense, food prepared with genuine care rather than culinary showmanship. Halfway through her meal, she noticed activity at the bar. Marcus had been pouring a glass of wine, the same Chianti she was drinking, when he paused, his attention shifting to something behind the bar. His expression didn't change dramatically, but Vivienne, trained to read micro-expressions, caught the subtle tightening around his eyes, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. He was looking at something that concerned him. The bartender, a younger man with nervous energy, said something Vivienne couldn't hear. Marcus replied, his voice too low to carry. Then, smoothly and without apparent urgency, Marcus lifted the wine glass the bartender had just poured and walked it toward Vivienne's table. She watched him approach, noting the deliberate casualness of his movements. I noticed your glass is getting low, Marcus said, setting the fresh wine down and smoothly collecting her nearly empty glass. This just came from a new bottle. Let me know if you notice any difference. Vivienne glanced at her original glass, which still had perhaps 2 sips remaining. I hadn't finished. My apologies. Occupational hazard. I sometimes anticipate too eagerly. His smile was pleasant, unremarkable. Please, enjoy the fresh pour. I'll bring back your original if you prefer. Something in his tone, barely perceptible, made Vivienne pause. His eyes met hers for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and she saw, what? Warning? Concern? It was there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. No, this is fine, she heard herself say. Thank you. Marcus nodded and moved away, taking her original wine glass with him. Vivienne watched him disappear into the kitchen, her mind already analyzing the interaction. It had felt off somehow. The explanation was plausible, overeager service, but the execution had been too deliberate, too smooth. She looked at the new wine glass, then at the kitchen door where Marcus had vanished. Every instinct honed over 8 years of navigating treacherous waters told her something had just happened, something significant masked as mundane. But what? The bartender was cleaning glasses, his movements jerky and faster than necessary. Nervous, Vivienne noted, though that could mean anything or nothing. Perhaps he was new, perhaps he was always anxious. Vivienne returned her attention to her ossobuco, but her hyper-awareness had been activated. She sipped the new wine. It tasted identical to the first, excellent and smooth. No strange aftertaste, no bitterness, nothing to suggest anything amiss. Yet Marcus's behavior nagged at her. She finished her meal methodically, her enjoyment now tempered by analytical thinking. When Marcus returned to clear her plate, she studied him carefully. Was everything satisfactory? He asked, his demeanor perfectly professional. Excellent, as always. Vivienne paused, then added, the wine service was attentive. Something flickered in his eyes again. Acknowledgement, perhaps relief. I aim to please. Dessert this evening? The tiramisu is exceptional. Just espresso, please. Double. Of course. He moved away again, and Vivienne pulled out her phone, ostensibly checking messages but actually using the camera function to discreetly photograph the bar area. The bartender had disappeared into the back. Only 2 other waitstaff were visible, both occupied with their tables. Her espresso arrived in a small white cup, the crema thick and perfect. Marcus set it down along with a small biscotti. Compliments of Aunt Maria, he said. She's pleased you enjoyed the ossobuco. Please thank her for me. It was remarkable. Marcus nodded, then, almost casually, said, You should call that cab soon. The rain's supposed to get heavier around 9. It was 7:45. The suggestion was reasonable, but again, something in his delivery felt deliberate. Vivienne had survived this long by trusting her instincts, and right now, every instinct told her that Marcus Hayes was trying to communicate something without saying it directly. I'll do that, she said. Thank you for the excellent service this evening. My pleasure, Ms. Drake. Vivienne Drake. Ms. Drake. He inclined his head slightly. I hope you'll come back soon. We're always happy to have thoughtful guests. After he left, Vivienne sipped her espresso and considered her options. She could leave now, following whatever unspoken guidance Marcus seemed to be offering, or she could stay, demand explanations, force clarity from shadows. But confrontation in a public place, surrounded by innocent diners, went against her principles. Whatever was happening, if anything was actually happening, could wait for a more appropriate venue. She finished her espresso, left cash on the table with a generous tip, and gathered her coat. As she stood, she caught Marcus's eye across the restaurant. He gave a small nod, nothing more, but Vivienne felt the weight of it. Outside, the rain had indeed intensified. Vivienne stood under the awning and called for a taxi, her mind racing through possibilities. Paranoia was an occupational hazard in her line of work, but so was complacency. The key was distinguishing between genuine threats and false alarms. The taxi arrived within minutes. Vivienne slid into the back seat and gave her address. A luxury high-rise in the Gold Coast, far from both her actual business operations and her true residence. She maintained 3 apartments across the city, rotating between them in irregular patterns. As the taxi pulled away from Bella Notte, Vivienne looked back at the small restaurant, its warm light spilling onto the dark, wet street. Through the window, she could see Marcus serving another table, his movements practiced and efficient, an ordinary waiter in an ordinary restaurant. Except Vivienne Drake had long ago learned that nothing was ever quite as ordinary as it appeared. Her phone rang as the taxi navigated through traffic. Vincent Romano. Yes, she answered. We have a situation. Vincent's voice was tense. Carlo Benedetti was found in his apartment an hour ago, dead. Apparent suicide, but the circumstances are questionable. Vivienne's blood chilled. Carlo Benedetti was one of her mid-level operatives, reliable but unremarkable. Questionable how? He left a note, confessing to skimming from the East Side operations, saying he couldn't live with the guilt. Vincent paused. The thing is, boss, I audited those accounts myself last week. There's no evidence of any skimming. The numbers are clean. Then why would he confess to something he didn't do? Exactly. And there's something else. His apartment? It's too clean, too staged. This wasn't someone overcome by guilt. This was made to look that way. Vivienne's mind raced ahead, connecting dots that were still forming. Where was Carlo tonight? Before he died? That's the thing I'm still tracking down. His schedule had him checking on a shipment at the docks, but find out exactly where he was, Vincent. Every place, every person he interacted with. I want a complete timeline on my desk by morning. Consider it done. Are you at the penthouse? I will be shortly. She ended the call and stared out at the rain-slicked streets. Carlo Benedetti. A minor player, not someone who would typically warrant attention. But if his death was staged, if someone had decided to eliminate him and make it look self-inflicted, that meant something significant had happened, something worth killing over. The taxi turned onto her street, and Vivienne's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. The glass was switched for a reason. You weren't drinking what you thought you were. Stay safe. Vivienne's breath caught. Marcus Hayes. She immediately texted back, explain. The response came quickly. Can't. Not safely. But trust me, you needed a different glass. The bartender tonight wasn't our regular guy. Vivienne's hands had gone cold. Who are you? Someone who pays attention. Be careful, Ms. Drake. Someone got close enough to try. The taxi pulled up to her building. Vivienne paid quickly and hurried inside, her mind reeling. She rode the elevator to her penthouse, her security team nodding as she passed, and locked herself in her private office. She pulled up the photo she'd taken at the restaurant, the bar area, the bartender visible in the background. She enlarged the image, studying his face. She didn't recognize him. Her regular bartender at Bella Notte was an older man, gray-haired and jovial. This one was younger, 30 at most, with features she now realized she'd never seen before tonight. Vivienne opened her laptop and pulled up the surveillance files her organization maintained on various establishments throughout the city. Bella Notte wasn't typically on her radar. It was a small family restaurant with no connection to her operations. But her people kept tabs on establishments in every neighborhood, just in case. She found footage from the restaurant's exterior camera, accessed through methods she preferred not to examine too closely. She scrubbed backward through the evening, watching people enter and exit. There, 7:15, just before she'd arrived. The regular bartender leaving, his expression troubled, and 5 minutes earlier, the young man who'd replaced him entering through the back alley. Someone had made a switch. Someone had planted a substitute bartender at Bella Notte specifically tonight, and Marcus Hayes had noticed. Vivienne pulled up Carlo Benedetti's file next, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. She needed to know his movements tonight, needed to understand the connection. Her phone rang again. Vincent. I found something, he said without preamble. Carlo's last known location before going home. He stopped at a restaurant in Little Italy, place called Bella Notte. His credit card shows a charge at 7:05 tonight. The world seemed to slow down around Vivienne. Carlo Benedetti had been at the same restaurant just minutes before her, and now he was dead, staged to look like suicide. The bartender had been switched. Marcus had changed her wine glass. You weren't drinking what you thought you were. Vincent, Vivienne said, her voice deadly calm. I need you to do something immediately. Send a team to Bella Notte restaurant. Quietly. I need you to retrieve a wine glass from their kitchen, specifically one that was removed from service around 7:30 tonight. Handle it carefully. I want it tested for everything. Boss, Just do it. Now. And Vincent? Tell the team to go in as health inspectors. Nothing that would alarm the owners. This is a civilian establishment. I want zero collateral impact. Understood. Anything else? Yes. I need everything we have on a Marcus Hayes. Late 30s, works as a waiter at Bella Notte. Prior military or law enforcement background likely. Be thorough but discreet. She ended the call and stood at her window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The rain streaked the glass, distorting the city lights into abstract patterns. Someone had tried to eliminate her tonight, tried to poison her in a small Italian restaurant where she'd thought herself safe. Anonymous. Removed from the constant threat that defined her professional life. But an observant waiter with mysterious skills had noticed. Had intervened. Had saved her life with a subtle exchange of wine glasses, so smooth she'd barely registered it happening. Marcus Hayes. Who was he really? Former military seemed likely. His bearing, his awareness, his ability to read situations and react without hesitation. But what was a man with those skills doing working as a waiter in his aunt's restaurant? And more pressingly, how much danger had he put himself in by interfering? If the person who'd orchestrated tonight's attempt discovered that Marcus had switched the glasses, he would become a liability, a witness who needed to be silenced. Vivienne made another call. I need protective surveillance on someone, she told the voice that answered. Marcus Hayes, employee at Bella Notte restaurant on Mulberry Street. I want eyes on him 24/7, but at a distance. He's not to know he's being watched, and he's not to be approached under any circumstances without my direct authorization. Duration? Until I say otherwise. And send me updates every 6 hours. She hung up and returned to her window. Somewhere out there in the rain-soaked city, Marcus Hayes was finishing his shift at the restaurant, probably unaware that he'd just become entangled in something far more dangerous than a simple act of service. He'd saved her life tonight. Now she would have to save his. But first she needed to understand who had gotten close enough to try to kill her, and why. The list of people who even knew about her occasional visits to Bella Notte was vanishingly small. This wasn't a random attempt. It was calculated, informed, personal. Someone in her inner circle had betrayed her, and Vivienne Drake had built her reputation on one simple principle. Betrayal always had consequences. The call came at 3:17 in the morning. Vivienne had been awake anyway, Seated in her home office with surveillance reports spread across her desk and the glow of multiple monitors casting blue light across her features. Sleep had become impossible after the events at Bella Notte. Her mind kept circling back to that moment, the subtle exchange of wine glasses, Marcus Hayes's carefully neutral expression, the weight of what hadn't been said. "Talk to me, Vincent," she answered on the first ring. "You were right to be suspicious." Vincent Romano's voice was grim. The glass tested positive for aconite, enough to cause severe symptoms within 30 minutes, fatal within 2 to 3 hours if untreated. Whoever prepared it knew exactly what they were doing. Vivienne's grip tightened on her phone. Aconite, wolfsbane, a traditional choice for those who understood plants and their properties, nearly undetectable until symptoms began. Death would have appeared natural, a sudden heart attack perhaps, or a stroke. By the time anyone thought to test for toxins, it would have been too late. And the bartender? Gone. The regular guy, Paulo Martinez, was told his shift was covered tonight. Got a call claiming to be from the owner saying there was a family emergency and he should take the night off. He thought it was legitimate. The substitute never showed up for cleanup and nobody got a clear look at him. We're running the exterior footage through facial recognition now. What about Carlo Benedetti's connection? That's where it gets interesting. Vincent paused and Vivienne heard papers rustling. Carlo stopped at Bella Notte at 7:05, just like his credit card showed. But here's what we didn't know. He met someone there. A brief conversation at the bar, less than 5 minutes. Our contact at the restaurant's neighboring business had exterior footage. Carlo looked agitated, nervous. Who did he meet? Still working on the identification. But boss, there's something else. When we examined Carlo's apartment more thoroughly, we found a burner phone hidden in his bathroom. Recent texts from an unknown number, all deleted but recoverable. Someone was pressuring him, threatening his family if he didn't cooperate. Vivienne stood, pacing to her window. The Chicago skyline was beginning to lighten with the approaching dawn. The rain finally stopped. Cooperate with what? That's what we're still piecing together. But the timeline suggests he was being used to gather information. Your schedule, your habits, your routines. Vincent's voice hardened. Someone was building a profile on you, boss. Carlo was feeding them details. And when they had what they needed, they eliminated him to tie up loose ends. Vivienne's voice was cold, analytical. The confession note was misdirection. Make it look like guilt over financial impropriety rather than what it really was. Silencing a source. Exactly. And if the attempt tonight had succeeded, both problems would have been solved simultaneously. You gone, and the trail ending with Carlo's apparent suicide. Vivienne's mind raced through implications. This level of planning, the resources required to pressure Carlo, to plant someone in the restaurant, to acquire aconite and know how to use it effectively. This isn't amateur work. No, it's not. Which means we're looking at someone with significant capabilities. Possibly someone within the organization, or at least someone with access to our inner workings. The suggestion hung heavy in the air between them. Vivienne had built her organization on loyalty, but she wasn't naive. Power always attracted those who wanted to take it. The question was, who had decided they were ready to make their move? Pull together the inner circle, Vivienne said. I want a full accounting of everyone's whereabouts tonight. Discreet inquiries, nothing that raises alarms. And Vincent, keep this information contained. As far as anyone knows, I enjoyed a quiet dinner and nothing unusual happened. Understood. What about the waiter? Marcus Hayes? Vivienne moved back to her desk, pulling up the preliminary report her people had compiled. Marcus Anthony Hayes, 38, honorably discharged from military service 5 years ago after 12 years of active duty. Records showed deployment to multiple international locations, though the specifics were classified. After discharge, he'd returned to Chicago, moved in with his elderly aunt, and taken work at her restaurant. On paper, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a veteran transitioning to civilian life, helping family, seeking simplicity after years of complexity. But Vivienne hadn't survived this long by accepting surface narratives. The surveillance I ordered, is it in place? Yes. Team reports he left the restaurant at 11:45, took the train home to a modest apartment in Bridgeport. Lights went out around 12:30. No unusual activity, no contacts. He appears to live alone. I want to talk to him. Boss, is that wise? If someone's watching, they won't be watching him. Why would they? As far as anyone knows, their plan succeeded. I drank the wine. I left the restaurant. They're waiting for news of my sudden illness, my unexpected death. Vivienne's smile was sharp. Let them wait. In the meantime, I need to understand exactly what Marcus Hayes saw and why he intervened. When? This morning. Early before he goes to work. I'll go alone. Vivienne. Vincent's use of her first name indicated serious concern. At least take backup. Stay in the car. Let me send someone to bring him to you. No. This conversation needs to happen face to face and it needs to be private. Marcus Hayes saved my life last night, Vincent. The least I owe him is a personal thank you. She paused. Besides, if he wanted me dead, he had the perfect opportunity. He chose the opposite. Vincent sighed, recognizing the futility of further argument. You'll be armed? Always. And Vincent? I want updates every hour on the investigation. Someone made a move against me. I want to know who before they realize it failed and try again. After ending the call, Vivienne spent another hour reviewing files on her key advisors. There were 12 people who formed her inner circle, men and women who handled different aspects of operations, from financial management to logistics to territorial oversight. She trusted each of them to varying degrees, but trust in her world was always conditional, always provisional. Any one of them could be plotting against her, or none of them. The threat could be external, someone who'd managed to infiltrate her organization's periphery, gathering intelligence through careful cultivation of sources like Carlo Benedetti. Either way, she would find them. And when she did, the response would be definitive. At 6:30 in the morning, Vivienne stood outside a modest 3-story building in Bridgeport. The neighborhood was working class, the kind of area where people minded their own business and early risers were already heading to jobs. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and a leather jacket. Casual clothes that helped her blend into the surroundings. She'd left her security detail blocks away. This meeting needed to be private. Marcus Hayes lived in apartment 2B. Vivienne climbed the exterior stairs, noting the well-maintained building despite its age. Someone took pride in this property. At his door, she paused, listening. Silence within, but lights showed through the gap beneath the door. She knocked. Footsteps approached immediately. He'd been awake, possibly near the door. Alert, even in his own home. The door opened, and Marcus Hayes stood before her in worn jeans and a gray t-shirt, barefoot, his hair still damp from a shower. His eyes widened slightly in recognition, but he recovered quickly. Ms. Drake? His voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. May I come in? I promise I won't take much of your time. Marcus glanced past her, scanning the hallway, then stepped aside. Of course. The apartment was small but meticulously organized. A kitchenette occupied one wall, with a 2-person breakfast bar separating it from a living area furnished with a worn but comfortable-looking couch and chair. Books lined makeshift shelves, everything from classic literature to military history to cookbooks. A small desk near the window held a laptop and a coffee mug. It was the home of someone who lived simply but thoughtfully. Coffee? Marcus asked, moving toward the kitchen. I just made a fresh pot. Please? Vivienne watched him pour 2 mugs with steady hands. No tremor, no nervousness. Either he was exceptionally calm, or he'd expected this visit. He handed her a mug, black, no sugar, exactly how she'd taken it at the restaurant. Another observation filed away. You remember how I take my coffee, Vivienne said. Occupational hazard. Marcus leaned against his kitchen counter, maintaining distance between them. Though I suspect you're not here to discuss my memory for customer preferences. No, Vivienne met his eyes directly. I'm here because the wine glass you switched last night tested positive for aconite, enough to be fatal. Something flickered across Marcus's face, concern, perhaps relief that she knew. You had it tested. Smart. You saved my life. I needed to understand why it needed saving. She paused. The question is, how did you know? How did you recognize what was happening? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his response. Finally, he said, The bartender was wrong. Wrong how? Paolo has worked at Bella Notte for 6 years. I know his routines, his mannerisms, the way he pours drinks. This guy last night, he moved differently. Too precise, too careful. Like someone performing a role rather than doing their job. Marcus set down his coffee. And when he prepared your wine, he pulled something from his pocket. Small vial, maybe half an ounce. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then added it to your glass. You saw him poison it. I saw him add something he didn't want anyone to notice. That was enough to concern me. Marcus's expression darkened. I've seen people die from poisoning, Miss Drake. Twice during my service overseas, once stateside. I recognize the setup when I see it. So you switched the glasses. Best option in the moment. If I'd confronted him directly, caused a scene, 2 things would have happened. First, you wouldn't have drunk it anyway, so immediate threat resolved. But second, whoever sent him would know their attempt failed and you were aware. They'd either try again immediately or disappear before you could find them. He shrugged. Switching the glass meant you stayed safe, and they wouldn't know right away that it hadn't worked. Vivienne studied him carefully. His logic was sound, his tactical thinking sharp. This wasn't just an observant waiter. This was someone with training, someone who'd operated in dangerous environments where split-second decisions meant life or death. Your former military intelligence, she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. That's classified information, Ms. Drake. Not as classified as you'd think. Not when you know where to look and have resources to access service records. Vivienne took a sip of her coffee. It was excellent, rich, and smooth. 12 years of service, multiple deployments, specialized training. You left with commendations and an honorable discharge. Now you're working as a waiter in your aunt's restaurant. Is there a question in there? Why? Men with your background typically transition to private security, consulting, government contracting, not service industry work. Marcus was quiet again, and Vivienne saw something in his expression that looked like old pain, carefully contained. I spent 12 years in situations where the wrong decision cost lives, where constant vigilance was the price of survival, where trust was complicated and danger was normal. He met her eyes. When I got out, I wanted simple. I wanted to wake up in the morning without immediately calculating threats. I wanted to help my aunt run her restaurant, serve good food to nice people, and go home at night without blood on my hands. The honesty in his voice was unexpected. Vivienne understood, perhaps more than he realized, the weight of living with constant threat assessment, the exhaustion of perpetual vigilance. That didn't quite work out, did it? She said softly. No. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Turns out trouble finds you even when you're trying to avoid it. It does. Vivienne set down her coffee mug. Marcus, the man who poisoned that wine, he's part of something larger. An attempt on my life that was carefully planned and executed. The person who organized it has resources, intelligence about my movements, and no hesitation about collateral damage. They eliminated someone yesterday, made it look self-inflicted, just to clean up loose ends. Marcus's expression hardened. And now I'm a loose end. Potentially. If they discover you interfered, that you're the reason I'm still alive, yes, you become a problem they'll want to solve. Let them try. There was no bravado in his tone, just calm assessment. I've handled worse. I'm sure you have, but this isn't a combat zone with rules of engagement, Marcus. These are people who will target your aunt, your friends, anyone you care about, if it gives them leverage or sends a message. Vivienne pulled a card from her jacket pocket and set it on his counter. I'm offering you protection. My people can keep you safe while we identify and handle the threat. Marcus looked at the card but didn't pick it up. Protection from who, exactly? You still don't know who's behind this. Not yet, but I will. And when you do? What happens then? Vivienne held his gaze. Justice happens. My kind of justice. Which means what, exactly? It means the threat will be neutralized permanently. It means the people responsible will answer for their actions. She paused. I won't lie to you, Marcus. I'm not a good person. I operate in shadows. I make decisions most people couldn't live with. And my world is built on principles that wouldn't stand up to moral scrutiny. But I protect what's mine. And right now, you're someone I owe a debt to. That means you're under my protection whether you want it or not. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're warning me about your world while simultaneously pulling me into it. I'm being honest about what involvement means. You saved my life last night. That created a connection whether we intended it or not. The people who tried to eliminate me will eventually realize their attempt failed. When they do, they'll start looking for reasons why. Eventually, they might look at you. So my options are accept your protection and definitely be involved in your world, or decline and possibly be targeted anyway. Essentially, yes. Marcus moved to his window, looking out at the awakening street below. You know what the hardest part about leaving service was? Coming home and realizing that the skills I'd developed, the person I'd become, none of it translated to normal life. I can clear a room, identify threats, make tactical decisions under pressure. But I can't turn it off. Even working at the restaurant, I'm constantly assessing, watching, analyzing. He turned back to face her. Last night at Bella Notte, part of me was relieved. Not that someone tried to hurt you. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But that my instincts were still sharp. That I could still act when it mattered. That all those years of training still meant something. Vivienne understood that feeling more than she could express. The need to be useful, to have purpose, to know that the difficult choices and hard-won skills served some greater function. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I don't need protection, Ms. Drake, but I would like answers. I'd like to know who used my aunt's restaurant as a staging ground for an assassination attempt. I'd like to know who put my family's business at risk. His expression was determined. And I'd like to help you find them. Marcus, I'm not asking to join your organization or become part of your world permanently, but this started in a place I care about involving people I love. That makes it personal. He picked up her card, examining it. You need someone who can think tactically, who understands operational security, who won't panic under pressure. I need purpose and answers. Seems like we can help each other. Vivienne considered carefully. Bringing Marcus deeper into this situation carried risks. For both of them. He could become more of a target, more entangled in the dangerous reality of her world. But he also brought skills her organization didn't typically employ, a perspective shaped by different experiences and loyalties. And there was something else, something she was less willing to examine, the way he looked at her. Not with fear or calculation or desire for advantage, but with honest assessment, like he saw her clearly, the danger, the complexity, the cost of what she was, and wasn't frightened by it. If you help with this, there are rules, she said finally. First, you follow my lead on operational decisions. I know these people. I know how they think. Second, you don't act independently without clearing it with me first. Coordination is essential. Third, if at any point I tell you to walk away, you do it. No arguments, no heroics. Agreed. On one condition, which is, no one else from my life gets involved. My aunt, my friends, they stay completely separate from this. Whatever we do, however this plays out, they remain safe and unaware. I can arrange that. Marcus extended his hand. Then we have a deal, Ms. Drake. Vivienne shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the calluses that spoke of someone who worked with their hands. Call me Vivienne. If we're going to work together, formality seems unnecessary. Vivienne. He tested the name, then nodded. And I'm Marcus. Just Marcus. All right, just Marcus. A slight smile touched her lips. We start with understanding the full scope of what we're facing. I have files on everyone in my inner circle, everyone who might have had motive and opportunity. We review them together, look for patterns, connections, anything that might point to who orchestrated this. Where? I have a secure location, somewhere we won't be observed or interrupted. My car is 2 blocks away. We can leave now if you're ready. Marcus glanced around his apartment, mentally calculating. Give me 5 minutes to change and grab a few things. He disappeared into what Vivienne assumed was a bedroom. She used the time to text Vincent an update. Hayes is cooperating, bringing him in for consultation, maintain surveillance perimeter but increase distance. The response came immediately. Understood. Are you sure about this? No. But my instincts say trust him. Monitor the situation. Marcus emerged wearing dark jeans, boots, and a black jacket over his t-shirt. He carried a small backpack. Go bag, Vivienne recognized. Old habits from his service years, always ready to move quickly. Ready, he said simply. They left together, and as Vivienne led him through the awakening streets of Chicago, she found herself wondering exactly what she'd set in motion. Marcus Hayes had saved her life, and now she was bringing him into the heart of her world. A world that consumed people, that changed them in ways they rarely anticipated. But she'd given him the choice, been honest about the risks. And he'd chosen involvement, chosen purpose over safety. She could respect that, even if part of her worried about what it might cost him in the end. Vincent Romano was waiting when they arrived at the secure location, a nondescript office building in the financial district that housed several legitimate businesses on the lower floors, and Vivienne's private operations center on the top floor, accessible only by keycard and biometric scan. Vincent's eyes assessed Marcus immediately, the way a professional evaluates potential threats. Marcus returned the assessment calmly, neither intimidated nor challenging. Vincent Romano, this is Marcus Hayes. Vivienne made the introduction. Marcus, Vincent is my second in command and the person coordinating our investigation. The two men shook hands briefly. Ms. Drake tells me you're the one who identified the threat last night, Vincent said. That was sharp work. Right place, right time, Marcus replied neutrally. Lucky for all of us. Vincent turned to Vivienne. We have developments. The facial recognition came back on the substitute bartender. His name is Thomas Carr, known associate of the Marchetti organization out of Boston. Professional work, suspected in at least 3 prior incidents, though never charged. Vivienne's expression sharpened. The Marchettis, they've been trying to expand into Chicago territory for the past year. Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Carlo Benedetti's phone records show multiple calls to a Boston number in the past month. We're still tracking the specific recipient, but the area code and patterns suggest Marchetti connection. Marcus spoke up. So the working theory is someone from Boston orchestrated this? Used local assets like Carlo to gather intelligence, then brought in their own specialist for the actual attempt? That's one theory, Vincent acknowledged. But the Marchettis don't typically work alone when moving into new territory. They build local alliances, find people willing to facilitate in exchange for position in the new power structure. You're suggesting someone inside fed them information? Vivienne said. Someone who wanted me gone and was willing to partner with outside interests to make it happen? It fits the pattern. The Marchettis have the specialized resources, the professional like Thomas Carr, the knowledge of substances like aconite. But they'd need local intelligence, your routines, your vulnerabilities, your security patterns. That requires inside access. Vivienne moved to the conference table where files were spread out. These are the inner circle. Everyone who has significant knowledge of my operations and movements. We need to find who had both motive and opportunity to make contact with Boston. Marcus joined her at the table, his eyes scanning the files with professional efficiency. Walk me through each of them. Their positions, their histories with you, any signs of discontent or financial pressure. For the next 2 hours, they reviewed each file systematically. Vincent provided context, Vivienne added personal observations, and Marcus asked questions that revealed his analytical training. By the end, they'd narrowed the list to 3 possibilities: people who had shown recent behavioral changes, had unexplained gaps in their schedules, or carried grudges that might motivate betrayal. We need more concrete evidence before we act, Vivienne said finally. Accusations without proof create chaos, and chaos creates opportunity for real threats to slip through. Agreed, Vincent said. But we also need to move carefully. If word spreads that you're investigating the inner circle, it could trigger exactly the chaos you're trying to avoid. Marcus had been studying the city map on the wall, marked with territories and operational zones. What about approaching this from the other direction? Instead of looking for who betrayed you from inside, trace the Boston connection backward. Find out who the Marchettis were talking to, intercept their communications, let them lead you to your traitor. Vivienne and Vincent exchanged glances. That's actually not a bad approach, Vincent admitted. We have contacts in Boston, people who monitor Marchetti activities. We could put out quiet inquiries, see what we can learn about their Chicago initiative. Do it, Vivienne decided, but maintain absolute discretion. If the Marchettis realize we're investigating them, they'll shut down communications and we'll lose our trail. Her phone buzzed, a text from her surveillance team. Hayes's apartment is being watched. 2 individuals in a parked car across the street showed up at 0700. Professional setup. Vivienne's blood chilled. She showed the message to Marcus. His expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. They're already looking for connections, probably checking everyone who worked at the restaurant last night. We need to assume they know you switched the glasses, Vivienne said, which means you were right. You're now a liability they want to address. Vincent was already on his phone, issuing instructions. I'm pulling our people in tighter. We'll have counter-surveillance in place within the hour. Marcus remained calm. What about my aunt? If they're targeting me, they might leverage her. Already handled, Vivienne assured him. I have a team positioned near Bella Notte, and another watching your aunt's residence. She's safe. Thank you. Marcus met her eyes, and Vivienne saw genuine gratitude there, layered with something else. A recognition that he'd fully crossed the line now. There was no returning to his simple life, not while this threat remained active. We should move you to a secure location, Vincent suggested, somewhere with proper protection. I have a better idea, Vivienne said. Marcus stays with me. My penthouse has security systems that would take a military operation to breach, and anyone watching will assume he's personal security or, she paused, something else. Either way, it provides cover and protection. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're sure about that? Having me that close to your personal space? You saved my life, Marcus. I think I can trust you in my home. Vivienne's tone was dry. Besides, we're working together on this investigation. Proximity makes communication easier. Then I accept. Thank you. Vincent looked between them, his expression unreadable. I'll coordinate the surveillance responses and continue tracking the Boston connection. You two should stay off-grid for the next 12 hours while we assess the full scope of what we're facing. They agreed, and Vivienne led Marcus to her private elevator. As they descended to the underground parking garage where her car waited, she found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her. The quiet competence, the steady calm, the sense that he was someone who could be relied upon in crisis. It had been a long time since she'd allowed anyone truly close. Her world didn't encourage trust or vulnerability, but circumstances had forced an alliance with Marcus Hayes, and everything in her was telling her that this man, this waiter who'd saved her life with a subtle exchange of wine glasses, might be exactly what she needed, both for survival and for something she was even less willing to name. The question was whether bringing him deeper into her world would save them both or destroy everything they were trying to protect. Vivienne's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of a sleek glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city spread out beneath them like a glittering circuit board. The November sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that reflected off the water. This is quite different from my apartment, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I imagine so. Vivienne set down her keys and briefcase, shrugging off her jacket. Make yourself comfortable. The guest room is down that hall, second door on the left. There's a full bathroom attached. Marcus turned from the window, taking in the space properly. The penthouse was elegant, but not ostentatious. Minimalist furniture in neutral tones, carefully chosen art on the walls, everything arranged with precise attention to both aesthetics and function. He noticed the security features too. Reinforced door frames, cameras positioned at strategic angles, what appeared to be bulletproof glass in the windows. A fortress disguised as a home. You live here alone? He asked. Yes. I value my privacy. Vivienne moved to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator. Are you hungry? I can order something, or there's ingredients if you prefer to cook. I can manage. Mind if I look? Go ahead. Marcus joined her in the kitchen, examining the contents of her refrigerator with the practiced eye of someone who knew their way around food. You have good ingredients here. Fresh vegetables, quality proteins. Do you cook? When I have time, which isn't often. Vivienne leaned against the counter, watching him. I take it you do? Grew up in my aunt's restaurant, remember? She insisted everyone in the family learn properly. Said cooking was about respect, for ingredients, for people you're feeding, for tradition. He pulled out vegetables and chicken. I could make something if you'd like. Better than takeout, and it'll give us time to think through what we learned today. I'd appreciate that. As Marcus began preparing food with efficient, practiced movements, Vivienne found herself relaxing slightly. There was something calming about watching someone work with such focused competence, transforming raw ingredients into something nourishing. It reminded her of why she'd been drawn to Bella Notte in the first place, the authenticity of craft, the honesty of good work done well. Tell me about your aunt, she said. Mrs. Rosselli. She seems like a formidable woman. Marcus smiled, chopping vegetables with precise knife work. Maria Rosselli is the strongest person I know. She raised 3 kids on her own after my uncle died, kept the restaurant running, and still had energy to take me in when I came back from service and needed somewhere to land. He paused, his expression softening. She's the reason I came home, the reason I wanted simplicity. She reminded me that there's value in ordinary things, feeding people, creating community, building something that lasts. Yet here you are, involved in something decidedly not simple. Life has a way of disrupting plans. He glanced at her. What about you? Any family? Vivienne's jaw tightened slightly. My father died 8 years ago. Heart attack. My mother passed when I was young. I barely remember her. No siblings. That must have been lonely. I had my work, my responsibilities. She watched his hands move, steady and sure. My father raised me to take over his business interests. Everything I learned from him. How to read people, how to make decisions, how to carry the weight of other people's expectations. Sounds like a lot of pressure for a young person. It was what was required. Vivienne's tone was matter-of-fact. When he died, there were people who thought I couldn't handle it, that I was too young, too inexperienced, too... She paused. Female. Proving them wrong became my focus. Marcus added chicken to the pan, the sizzle filling the kitchen with rich aroma. And now, after 8 years of proving yourself, what drives you? It was a more perceptive question than Vivienne had expected. She considered carefully before answering. Maintaining what I've built, protecting the people who depend on me, ensuring that the structure stays stable. She met his eyes. And maybe, occasionally, finding moments of actual peace, like a quiet dinner at a good restaurant, until someone tries to poison you. Until that, yes. They shared a brief smile, acknowledging the dark absurdity of the situation. Marcus plated the food, perfectly seared chicken with roasted vegetables and a light lemon sauce. They sat at her dining table, the city lights beginning to glow as darkness fell outside. This is excellent, Vivienne said after the first bite. Your aunt taught you well. She'd be pleased to hear you say so. Marcus ate quietly for a moment, then said, Can I ask you something? About your world, your work? What made you choose to continue after your father died? You could have walked away, sold everything, lived differently. Vivienne set down her fork, considering the question seriously. I thought about it. For about 3 days after his funeral, I genuinely considered liquidating everything and disappearing, starting over somewhere new, becoming someone else. She looked out at the city, but then I realized, this is what I know, these are my skills. And the alternative was letting everything my father built collapse into chaos. The people who worked for us would have been vulnerable to takeovers, territorial disputes, instability. Walking away felt like abandonment. So you stayed out of responsibility, initially, but over time I discovered I was good at it, better than my father in some ways. I could see patterns he missed, build alliances he never considered, Find solutions to problems that would have defeated him. She met Marcus's eyes. It's not a good life by most measures, but it's mine, and I've made it work. Even though it means constant threat, never really being able to trust anyone completely, trust is complicated in any context. At least in my world, the rules are clear. Everyone understands what loyalty costs and what betrayal brings. Vivienne took another bite. What about you? Do you miss it? Military service? The clarity of mission? The brotherhood? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Parts of it. The sense of purpose, definitely. Knowing that what you did mattered, that lives depended on your competence. The people I served with, that bond is hard to replicate in civilian life. He paused. But I don't miss the cost. The things I saw, the decisions I had to make, the way it changed how I see the world. You can't turn that off. Once you've lived with constant threat assessment, you never really stop. No, Vivienne agreed softly. You don't. They finished eating in comfortable silence, both recognizing the strange kinship between them, two people who'd lived in worlds of high stakes and constant vigilance, who understood the weight of responsibility and the isolation it created. After dinner, they moved to Vivienne's office space within the penthouse. She pulled up files on her computer while Marcus examined the physical documents Vincent had provided. The 3 suspects we identified earlier, Marcus said, spreading photos across the desk. What's your instinct about each of them? Vivienne studied the faces. Richard Chen has been with the organization for 12 years. He's brilliant with financial strategy but ambitious. He's made comments about modernizing operations, expanding into territories I consider too high risk. We've disagreed on direction. Motive for wanting you gone, he thinks he could run things better. Possibly. But Richard is cautious, methodical. A move this bold feels inconsistent with his personality. Vivienne tapped the second photo. Elena Vasquez has been handling our logistics for 6 years. She's efficient, reliable, but her brother was arrested last year on unrelated charges. She might be under financial pressure for his legal defense. Financial pressure makes people vulnerable to outside influence, Marcus observed. It does. But Elena has always been loyal, even when tested. Vivienne moved to the third photo. And then there's James Sullivan. Former law enforcement came to work for us 5 years ago. He knows the system from both sides, which makes him valuable, but there's always been something contained about him, like he's holding back part of himself. Marcus picked up Sullivan's file, reading through his background. Former detective, decorated career, left the force under ambiguous circumstances. The official report says personal reasons, but that's usually code for something else. I've always wondered what really happened, but he's been competent and professional, so I didn't press. Vivienne pulled up financial records. No unusual transactions for any of them in recent months. No obvious red flags. What about travel? Did any of them make trips to Boston or have connections there? Vivienne ran searches, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Richard traveled to New York 3 times in the past 2 months for business meetings. Elena hasn't left Chicago. James, she paused. James had a week off last month, claimed family emergency. His file shows he grew up in Boston before moving to Chicago. Marcus and Vivienne locked eyes. That's a connection worth exploring, Marcus said carefully. Before Vivienne could respond, her phone rang. Vincent. We have a situation, he said without preamble. Our Boston contacts just reported that Thomas Carr, the substitute bartender, was found dead 2 hours ago. Single shot to the head in a parking garage. Professional execution. Vivienne's grip tightened on the phone. They're cleaning up loose ends. Looks that way. And boss, there's something else. We intercepted a communication from a Marchetti-associated number. Very brief, but the message was clear. Chicago contact compromised. Initiate secondary protocol. What secondary protocol? We don't know yet, but the fact that they're calling the Chicago contact compromised suggests they know we're investigating. Someone warned them. Vivienne felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder. A steady, grounding touch. She met his eyes and saw understanding there. They were running out of time. Vincent, I need you to bring in all 3 suspects for individual meetings tomorrow morning. Standard check-ins, nothing that raises alarm. Stagger them. Chen at 8, Vasquez at 9:30, Sullivan at 11. I want to look each of them in the eye. You think you can tell who it is by talking to them? I think scared people make mistakes. And whoever betrayed me knows the net is closing. They'll be scared. After ending the call, Vivienne stood and moved to her window, looking out at the city. Marcus joined her, maintaining a respectful distance but offering silent support. This is the part I hate most, Vivienne said quietly. Knowing someone I trusted, someone I gave opportunity and responsibility to, decided I was expendable, that they were willing to partner with outside interests and risk everyone's security just to advance their own position. Betrayal always cuts deep, Marcus said, especially when it comes from inside. How did you handle it? In your military service when someone you trusted let you down? Marcus's expression darkened with memory. It happened once. A man in my unit who sold information to the opposition got 3 good people killed before we discovered what he'd done. He was quiet for a moment. I learned that loyalty isn't automatic. It has to be earned continuously, and even then, people can change. Circumstances can change them. What happened to him? The man who betrayed you? Military justice. He faced consequences appropriate to his actions. Marcus turned to face her. But I also learned to examine my own role. What had I missed? What signs had I overlooked? How could I prevent it from happening again? And could you? Prevent it? Not entirely. But I got better at reading people, at creating systems where betrayal was harder to execute and easier to detect. He studied her carefully. You've built those systems too, Vivienne. The fact that you discovered this plot before it succeeded proves that. I discovered it because you intervened. If you hadn't been observant, if you hadn't acted, but I did, and now we're working together to finish this. Marcus's voice was firm. You're not alone in this, Vivienne. Not anymore. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond their surface. Vivienne realized that at some point in the past 18 hours, Marcus Hayes had become more than just someone she owed a debt to. He'd become an ally, a confidant, someone she was beginning to trust in ways she rarely allowed herself. It was dangerous. Attachment created vulnerability, but it was also, she was surprised to acknowledge, comforting. Thank you, she said simply, for being here, for helping with this. You're welcome. Marcus smiled slightly. Though I should point out that you're also helping me, giving me purpose again, letting me use skills I thought I'd left behind. It turns out I needed this too. They stood together at the window as night deepened over Chicago, 2 people from different worlds finding unexpected common ground. Outside, the city hummed with life, millions of people pursuing their own dreams and struggles, unaware of the chess game being played in shadows, where their safety and stability depended on people like Vivienne making hard decisions. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. Tomorrow they would face the person who'd betrayed her trust and tried to end her life. But tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of her penthouse, Vivienne allowed herself a rare moment of genuine connection and found herself hoping that when this was over, when the threat was neutralized and justice served, Marcus Hayes wouldn't simply walk away, because something had shifted between them, something neither had anticipated, but both were beginning to recognize. The question was whether they would survive long enough to explore what it might become. Chapter 4. The Price of Survival. The morning sun cast long shadows across Vivienne's office as she sat across from James Sullivan. His hands were steady, his expression calm. But Vivienne had spent 8 years reading people. She saw the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered to the door. Thank you for coming in early, James, she said smoothly. Of course. You said it was important. Marcus stood near the window, seemingly casual but positioned where he could observe Sullivan's reactions. They'd planned this carefully. 2 interviews had already happened, both unremarkable. But Sullivan was different. I've been reviewing our security protocols, Vivienne continued, particularly around information flow. Tell me, James, when was the last time you visited Boston? Sullivan's expression didn't change, but his breathing shifted slightly. Boston? I haven't been back in years. Why? Really? Because our records show you took personal time last month. Family emergency, you said. That was in Milwaukee, not Boston. My sister was ill. His voice remained steady, but sweat was forming at his temples. Vivienne pulled out a photograph. Thomas Carr, the substitute bartender. Do you recognize this man? Sullivan looked at the photo and Vivienne saw it, the brief flash of recognition before he schooled his features. No, should I? He tried to eliminate me 3 nights ago. Professional hired by the Marchetti organization out of Boston. Vivienne's voice was cold. The same organization you've been feeding information to for the past 2 months. The silence stretched taut between them. I don't know what you're talking about, Sullivan said, but his hand trembled as he reached for his coffee cup. Marcus moved slightly, drawing Sullivan's attention. You were a good detective once, James. You knew how to read evidence, follow trails. You should have known that Vivienne's organization would be just as thorough. Sullivan's composure cracked. You don't understand. They have my daughter, the Marchettis. They found out about her, threatened her if I didn't cooperate. His voice broke. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I just wanted my daughter safe. Vivienne felt something shift inside her. Betrayal, yes, but born from desperation, not ambition. Why didn't you come to me? I could have protected her. Could you? Really? Sullivan's eyes were haunted. The Marchettis have resources, Reach. I didn't think anyone could stand against them. You were wrong. Vivienne stood, making a decision that would have surprised her father. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell us everything. Every contact. Every piece of information you gave them. Every plan they have. In exchange, I'll bring your daughter here. Full protection, new identity if necessary. She'll be safe. Sullivan stared at her. Why would you help me after what I did? Because you were a good man in an impossible situation. And because I understand what it means to protect family. Vivienne's expression hardened. But the cooperation starts now, James. Complete honesty, or the deal is off. Over the next hour, Sullivan detailed everything. The Marchettis had been planning a major expansion into Chicago, using Vivienne's elimination as the opening move. With her gone, they expected chaos in the power vacuum, making territorial acquisition easier. They have another team coming, Sullivan revealed. Professional operators arriving tonight. The plan was to target your inner circle, destabilize everything at once. Marcus and Vivienne exchanged glances. Then we need to move first, Marcus said. Vivienne was already on her phone. Vincent, initiate Protocol 7, full security lockdown on all key personnel. And I need you to coordinate with our Boston contacts. It's time to send the Marchettis a message they'll understand. What followed was a carefully orchestrated operation. Vivienne's organization moved with precision, securing vulnerable associates, intercepting the incoming team at the airport through anonymous tips to law enforcement, and most critically, rescuing Sullivan's daughter from the supervised facility where the Marchettis had been monitoring her. By nightfall, the threat had been neutralized. The Marchetti organization, facing exposure and the loss of their Chicago operatives, withdrew their expansion plans. Thomas Carr's death had already severed their direct connection, and with Sullivan now cooperating with Vivienne, they had no foothold remaining. 3 days later, Vivienne stood in her penthouse with Marcus, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. Sullivan and his daughter are settled in Seattle, she said. New identities, clean start. He'll work in private security, legitimate work, away from all of this. You gave him mercy, Marcus observed. I gave him a chance. What he was fighting for, protecting his child, I can understand that. It doesn't excuse the betrayal, but it provides context. Vivienne turned to face him. My father would have handled it differently, more harshly. But you're not your father. No, I'm learning that I don't have to be. She moved closer to Marcus. You've changed how I see things. Shown me that strength can include compassion, that justice doesn't always require severity. Marcus smiled. And you've shown me that purpose can exist outside traditional structures, that the skills I developed can still matter, even in unexpected contexts. They stood close now, the space between them charged with everything unspoken over the past days, the danger they'd faced together, the trust they'd built, the connection neither had anticipated but both had come to value. What happens now? Vivienne asked quietly. You helped me resolve this threat. You could walk away, return to your simple life at the restaurant. I could, Marcus agreed. But I don't want to. Not entirely. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady. What if there's a middle path? I keep working at Bella Notte. It's still important to me, still part of who I am. But I also work with you, occasionally, when you need someone who thinks tactically, who can see things from a different perspective. A consultant? Vivienne's lips curved slightly. A partner, in the professional sense. Marcus paused. And maybe eventually in other senses too, if we both want that. Vivienne felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, possibility, the sense that maybe isolation wasn't the only option. I'd like that, both parts. They moved together, the kiss natural and inevitable. When they pulled apart, Vivienne found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in longer than she could remember. Outside, Chicago glowed with evening light. Inside, two people who'd found each other through danger and necessity were beginning something new, something neither had planned but both were willing to explore. Vivienne's world would always carry risks. But with Marcus beside her, grounding her, challenging her, reminding her of the humanity beneath the strategy, those risks felt more manageable. And for the first time in 8 years, Vivienne Drake looked toward the future and felt not just determination, but actual hope. The waiter who'd saved her life had given her something more valuable than survival. He'd given her a reason to want to live differently,